Today's cars are essentially computers on wheels, powered by thousands of semiconductors, tiny chips that control everything from unlocking doors to deploying airbags. These chips are the unsung heroes of modern automotive technology, working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that every function of the car operates smoothly and efficiently. These chips manage critical systems like fuel injection, anti-lock brakes, and advanced driver assistance features, making modern vehicles safer and more efficient. Without these semiconductors, the sophisticated safety and performance features we take for granted would be impossible. Touchscreen displays, navigation, and climate controls all rely on powerful processors, while sensors and chips enable lane keeping and emergency braking. These technologies not only enhance the driving experience, but also contribute to the overall safety and convenience of modern vehicles. As cars become more connected and autonomous, their dependence on semiconductors only grows. The future of driving is increasingly digital, with cars that can communicate with each other and with infrastructure, all thanks to these tiny but powerful chips. A single missing chip can halt an entire assembly line, as seen during the global chip shortage that cost automakers billions. This shortage highlighted just how critical these components are to the automotive industry. The supply chain for these chips is global and fragile. Design, fabrication, and packaging often happen in different countries. This complexity makes the supply chain vulnerable to disruptions, which can have far-reaching consequences. Any disruption can ripple through the industry, causing delays, higher prices, and economic losses. The interconnected nature of the global supply chain means that a problem in one part of the world can affect production and availability everywhere. Semiconductors aren't just tech components, they're strategic assets underpinning critical industries like transportation. Their importance cannot be overstated, as they are essential to the functionality and advancement of modern vehicles. The story of Nexperia highlights how the chip supply chain has become a new front in global competition. Nations are now recognizing the strategic importance of securing a stable supply of these critical components. Understanding chips is key to understanding the challenges facing the global economy and international relations. As we move forward, the role of semiconductors will only become more significant in shaping the future of technology and industry. In September 2025, the Dutch government took control of Nexperia, a major semiconductor company previously owned by China's Wingtech. Citing national security, Dutch officials feared the transfer of critical technology and know-how to China, especially for chips with potential military uses. This intervention marked a shift in Europe's approach to protecting strategic industries from foreign influence. The move was a response to growing Western concerns about China's push for tech dominance and self-sufficiency. By seizing Nexperia, the Netherlands aimed to secure its chip supply chain and keep advanced manufacturing under European oversight. The action sent a strong message. Europe would use state power to protect its economic and security interests, even at the risk of provoking China. This set the stage for a major diplomatic and economic confrontation. The future of Nexperia, and the chips it produced, was now at the center of a high-stakes standoff. China responded swiftly to the Dutch takeover, banning the re-export of Nexperia chips from its territory. This sudden move sent shockwaves through the global tech industry. Nexperia's chips, fabricated in Europe but assembled and packaged in China, suddenly couldn't reach European customers. This disruption was felt immediately across various industries. This move weaponized a critical supply chain link, threatening to cut off essential components for Europe's automotive industry. Car manufacturers were left scrambling for alternatives. China's message was clear: interfere with Chinese-owned assets, and Beijing will leverage its manufacturing dominance to retaliate. The strategic importance of China's manufacturing capabilities was on full display. The ban aimed to pressure European carmakers, like Volkswagen, to lobby their governments to reverse the takeover. The automotive sector, heavily reliant on these chips, was particularly vulnerable. China framed the ban as a necessary countermeasure, not aggression, urging the EU to persuade the Netherlands to back down. Diplomatic tensions were at an all-time high. The result: a supply chain emergency that risked idling factories across Europe. Production lines ground to a halt, and workers faced uncertainty. The crisis exposed the deep interdependence of global tech manufacturing. It highlighted how interconnected and fragile these supply chains truly are. China's strategic move turned a corporate dispute into a continent-wide industrial emergency. The ripple effects were felt far and wide. The pressure was now on Europe to find a way out. Policymakers were in a race against time to resolve the crisis. China's sudden export ban sent shockwaves through Europe's car industry, which was already struggling to recover from the lingering effects of previous chip shortages and supply chain disruptions. The timing couldn't have been worse, as automakers were just beginning to stabilize production and rebuild inventories. Nexperia chips, though not flashy or widely known to the public, are absolutely vital for the power management and control systems that keep modern vehicles running smoothly. Without these small but essential components, even the most advanced cars can't function. German automakers, who have long relied on just-in-time delivery to keep costs down and efficiency high, suddenly face the very real prospect of halting production lines within days if the chip supply dried up. The ban threatened tens of thousands of jobs, from major brands to small suppliers, putting livelihoods at risk across the entire automotive ecosystem. Smaller firms, with fewer resources and less bargaining power, considered drastic measures like reducing working hours, furloughing staff, or even temporary shutdowns just to survive the uncertainty. The uncertainty paralyzed planning and created widespread anxiety across the sector, as no one could predict how long the disruption would last, or how deep its impact would be. The crisis exposed a harsh reality. Europe's vulnerability ran deep. Even chips designed and partially made in Europe still depended on Asian facilities for crucial final assembly and testing steps. China's dominance in packaging and testing left Europe exposed to sudden shocks, highlighting a critical weak link in the global supply chain. The ban was a wake-up call. Owning the design and fabrication wasn't enough if the final steps were out of Europe's control. True independence required more. To secure its future, Europe needed to take charge of the entire chip production chain, from design to packaging and testing, ensuring resilience against future disruptions. The industry's deep dependence on Asia had become a glaring strategic risk, threatening not just profits, but the very stability of Europe's automotive sector. The need for a comprehensive European solution had never been clearer, as leaders and industry experts called for urgent action to safeguard the continent's technological future. Volkswagen, Europe's largest car maker, warned that the Nexperia chip ban could halt production at key plants. Even a minor disruption could cost billions and derail output for months. Nexperia chips power everything from electric car batteries to basic controls in Volkswagen vehicles. Without them, assembly lines would stop. No substitutes, no quick fixes. Volkswagen's public alarm was a strategic move, pressuring EU leaders to act fast. The crisis was no longer just a Dutch problem, it threatened the entire European economy. Previous efforts to diversify supply chains were useless against a politically motivated proprietary chip ban. Finding new suppliers would take months, time the industry didn't have. The EU Commission was forced to step in, making the chip crisis a top priority. The livelihoods of hundreds of thousands now depended on a diplomatic breakthrough. The stakes for Europe's industrial future had never been higher. With factories at risk, EU leaders launched urgent talks with China to resolve the standoff. The European Commission, led by Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic, sought a deal to resume chip exports while addressing security concerns. A breakthrough came after a high-level US-China summit, which helped shift the tone of negotiations. China signaled willingness to ease the ban as a gesture of goodwill, opening the door for compromise. EU negotiators proposed a civilian use exemption, allowing chips for automotive use while keeping security safeguards. The focus was on restoring supply chains without conceding on the core ownership dispute. Behind closed doors, technical and political discussions intensified, with Germany and France pushing for a quick resolution. The civilian use carve-out became the key to unlocking the crisis. In early November 2025, the first signs of relief appeared as German supplier Aumovio received permission to import Nexperia chips from China. Soon after, the EU and China announced a partial resumption of exports under a civilian use exemption. Chips could now flow to European carmakers, provided they were used strictly for non-military applications. The deal allowed factories to restart and averted immediate shutdowns. EU officials welcomed the move, but stressed it was only a temporary fix. Companies had to provide documentation proving chips were for automotive use, adding some bureaucracy but restoring supply. The agreement bought time for further negotiations on a long-term solution. For now, Europe's car industry could breathe again, but the underlying conflict remained unresolved. The partial export resumption eased the crisis, but the core dispute over Nexperia's ownership persisted. The Dutch government stood firm, citing national security, while China continued to demand the return of its asset. The uneasy truce left Nexperia and its customers in a precarious position, with future disruptions always possible. Carmakers now had to factor geopolitical risk into their long-term planning, accelerating efforts to localize chip production. Trust between Europe and China was eroded, making future cooperation harder. The Nexperia saga highlighted the risks of deep tech integration with strategic rivals. The chip war was far from over. This was just a pause in a larger struggle. The Nexperia crisis showed how global politics can directly impact everyday life, affecting car prices, availability, and jobs. The near shutdown of Europe's car industry revealed the fragility of high-tech supply chains. For workers, the threat of layoffs underscored their vulnerability to distant geopolitical disputes. The crisis has accelerated Europe's push for technological sovereignty, with initiatives like the European Chips Act aiming to secure domestic production. The lesson: economic security now depends on controlling critical technologies. Europe must invest in its own chip ecosystem and diversify supply chains to avoid future shocks. The uneasy truce is a warning. Strategic resilience is as vital as efficiency. The Nexperia saga will shape Europe's industrial policy for years to come. In a world where technology, trade, and security are intertwined, Europe's future depends on learning from this chip drama.